Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. FloTrack podcast at gmail.com is our email address. I'm Kevin. He's Lincoln. We are doing a end of the year award segment show today, and we're talking about best women's races of 2020. Lincoln, how are you?
Doing really well. It's full disclosure. We're doing this a little later in the day, so it's not so chilly. I'm in a t-shirt now, as opposed to normally I'm kind of like double hoodied up. So I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Okay, so how did we come up with this list? We have about 6. We're doing the top 6 because some people would do 5, some people would do 10, but we settled on 6. Can you explain?
Were there even 10 total women's races? I don't know if there were 10 races total. I don't think we could get to 10. Yeah.
Well, there certainly were. If you did this by track meets, there were not 10 total track meets. But yeah, how did we come up with this list, Lincoln? What did we do to prepare?
Well, definitely looked at the world record on the track. That was one that was seriously considered and did in fact make the final cut. Otherwise, you had some road races that were good. They produced fast times. In a normal year, maybe some of these road races we considered, they wouldn't fall in the best race category because maybe, the fight for the victory was kind of determined much earlier than what we would normally define a good race in the marathon. So yeah, we looked at some of the biggest events, who won those, and then some of the best, obviously, just individual performances. Not a ton to choose from on the women's side, much easier. I think this will be on this exercise on the men's side, but fast performances clearly. And then the biggest races that there were, whoever won those, I think those do take the cake here in this truncated season.
Yeah. And you might think, hey, is there going to be a little bit of an American bias because you guys are American? And the answer to that is yes. There's definitely going to be an American bias here because also there were some good one-off races in the United States. I think we can say that. One thing I tried to think back on, which it didn't ultimately yield any entrance in this list, but I tried to think back to indoors. Lincoln, I tried to think back, are we missing something? And we had Eleanor Purrier ran really, really fast at the Melrose Games. Remember that? And then we had the showdown in Albuquerque. Pretty good race there. With Shelby Houlihan ran really well over that weekend and got the sweep. So nothing though really jumped out to me as top 5 of the year categories. I tried to think about collegiate races. Was there anything that we missed there? But I kept coming back to the same ones. I kept coming back to the big ones, the ones you'd assume would be on the list.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the Purrier race, and I had kind of forgotten about it, and not because it wasn't memorable. She obviously ran the second fastest indoor mile ever and broke the American record, but it's just, it has been so long ago that it's easy to forget about. But that might end up being a snub here, Kevin, is that mile, because a lot of people, I think, 3, 4, maybe, I think 3 broke 4:20. I mean, that was a pretty good race. That one falls into the great race category, so, spoiler alert, that might end up being our biggest snub, but this is a compelling list on its own without that mile.
That can be number 7. That's where we can start with the Melrose Games women's mile there with Purrier leading the way. That's one that when I thought back to, okay, what was going on indoors? Because if you remember, the Nanjing World Indoor Championships were canceled relatively early in the year as it related to everything else in the world getting shut down. So there was this period of time where it was a zombie indoor season. Now, the collegians were still going as if there was going to be a indoor championships in Albuquerque. But for the pros, it was looking like, okay, they're going to have a meet at USA's, and then that's going to be it. So some of the luster is off of this thing. And then it just completely went off the rails and everything got canceled. So it was hard to figure out what the indoor season was going to be like anyway. And then what happened after that point.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it did get postponed because I remember by USA's, which was mid-February, World Indoors had been called off. But I remember in late January, it hadn't yet. So with Milrose happening, I think, early the week before USA's. It may have been right after when it got postponed, but in any case, that the mile, 4 women breaking 4:20. Let's see what they had it exactly. Purrier 4:16.85, Constance Klosterhoffen 4:17.26, Gemma Reekie, obviously a big year for her, 4:17.88, and then GDS Gabrielle Debut Stafford 4:19.73. I mean, that was a really fun race, and the Milrose Games is always a favorite of mine. It always produces good distance races. And just the kind of out of nowhere nature of that for Purrier, that she broke, smashed the American record and the second fastest all time. Didn't have that one on my bingo board coming into the season. Easy to forget about now, but that was a big, big step for her. I know the week after she got kind of put in her place by Shelby Houlihan, but still it elevated our understanding of Purrier, and it was probably her biggest performance of her career so far.
Okay, so then we move on to number 6. We're counting down to number 1 here. And let's go Perez Jepchirchir, Valencia Marathon. I guess if you want to take the entire race as a whole, you could also throw in the women's half marathon where Genzebe Dababa made her debut. Emily Sisson missed the American record by a second. There was a lot going on in this race, Lincoln. So I think Valencia, their late season marathon makes the list here.
Yeah, since September. I mean, going back to Prague, where Jepchirchir initially broke the women's only world record. This event got hot and heavy for sure. But Jepchirchir, I think, and maybe you think as well, deserved to be athlete of the year when you talk about what she did in Prague, winning. Then she won this race, the World Half Marathon Championships, and then running 2:17 at Valencia. We'll talk about that in a moment, but. That is what I will remember from this year. And just because it was the lone championship race, I will remember this World Half Marathon Championships. It was a question of who's going to be better. Is it going to be the world record holder who has the outright record with, Abel Yeshina, who ran under 65 minutes or ran 64:31 with male pacers? Or is it going to be the person who has the women's only world record? And I think the answer is much more that they're closer in abilities, but it was Jepchirchir emerging, albeit it was helped on by a fall there by Yeshina. But Jepchirchir emerged as a star this year, so you have to at least include one of her races. As this was you could argue this was the biggest distance race in the world this year, simply because of all the cancellations. And there were medals on the line here, and so she has to be included. Okay,
I had that one at 5. I had Jepchirchir's Valencia race at 6. Did you switch them on me, Lincoln? Is that what happened here?
I'm having trouble here. Okay, so I jumped the gun. 6 is Valencia. Okay. That's fine. It wasn't as competitive. She ran 2:17 though, one of the best times in history. So sorry, yeah. I'm jumping the gun. We have 2 entrants. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's good. You did a good synopsis of the world half. Listen,
Jepchirchir was so good. She gets 2 slots. Okay. She gets 5 and 6.
That's fine. Whatever. That's fine. Listen, I had her for World Athlete of the Year. I did not think Rojas should have gotten it. She did. But the least Jepchirchir can leave 2020 with is knowing that she has 2 spots on the FloTrack best women's races of the year. Valencia,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, Valencia, just that race was a little bit more ho-hum. I mean, she ran one of the fastest times of all time. I'm not downplaying that, but just the sheer dominance didn't make it as interesting a race, but you have to include it because she ran 2:17. World half, I thought was awesome because there were prominent half marathons this year, and as a result, there were prominent half marathoners, and they all showed up to this one. It's too bad the United States wasn't able to go for obvious reasons, but we had a lot of big names in there. I thought the course was cool. There were 3 falls. It was almost as if it was the men's steeple from 2019. Everybody was on the ground. It was pretty cool. And Jepchirchir got the dub and got her second women's only world record. So I thought that race had a little bit of everything. That's the best the World Half Marathon Championships can be. I think we reached peak World Half Marathon Championships.
So what did we learn? Do we take more stock in just the outright world record or the women's only world record?
Are you talking about Yeshina versus Jepchirchir?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like why do we, I'm of the opinion they don't need to be kept like this. Like, I mean, there doesn't need to be two separate records. We could one day get to a point where the women's only world record's faster than the actual world record. And then what do we do with it at that point? I just,
well, the women's only world record would then supersede the mixed world record. Listen, there's a third entrant here too, because if you look at the just fastest performances ever over 13.1, Bridget Koskai's run in the UK on a slightly downhill course is actually the fastest time, 64.
Yes.
28. Yeah. So really, really fun bit of track and field that there's three fastest half marathoners of all time.
Yeah, it's not confusing in the least.
No, I just thought this was a cool race. I thought, for the reasons I said, it was just an entertaining race. Yeah, and they got after it. It wasn't tactical, and because it would have been better, yes, if the Americans were there, and if Sifan Hassan showed up, or Latensipet Gidey was able to be there, something like that would have been that. You could have added more to it, but there were. I mean, Yeshina now is a name in the half marathon. Obviously, Jepchirchir is a name in the half marathon. Jocelyn Chepkoskai is a big name. Gudeta's a big name. They had the A squad out there, and then you saw a breakthrough from Malat Kejeta of Germany to get second.
Yeah. Yes.
So European record for her, women's only European record, but probably a world record or probably a European record regardless.
Who knows?
Nope. Sifan Hassan 65:15 has run faster.
Yeah, don't count your eggs before they've hatched, though, Kevin. It's you never know.
Usually, if you don't know who has a record in the women's side of things, it's usually Sifan Hassan. That's
I just assume on the European side, 800, it's probably Sifan Hassan. Half marathon, it could be hers too. Let's just go with it.
Speaking of Sifan Hassan, we did not put the hour record in this. Do you feel like that's a snub?
No, that race was fine. It just was.
I was just kidding.
I would have just preferred to see that on the roads. I don't know. It was just weird on the track. It was too much on the track, and it was dull. It was kind of. I would have said it was embarrassing that she was included in the World Athlete of the Year finalist, but then Yulimar Rojas won while barely competing. So I guess Sifan Hassan should have been there, but that felt more like a default setting. Just Sifan Hassan gets in there because the 1 hour record was fluky. Not fluky that she ran it, but that's not real. I mean, so why don't we do the 30-minute record? Let's do the 20-minute record. And does Usain Bolt have the 9-second record and the 10-second record? It's just, I don't know. I just don't like it.
Sifan Hassan. Sifan Hassan did have that 29:36 10,000 in horrible weather.
That's right. That's right.
In Angola.
Sorry, forgot about
it. Her number 4 all time. But I bring that up to say she's obviously great at the half marathon. She's already run 65 minutes. It would have been cool to see her in this sort of setting. That would have been fun.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Very disappointed that she wasn't there. I mean, think about on the men's side, you had Mo Farah, and if you could have had Sifan Hassan, it would have been a ton of fun. But can't always get what we want. And we got a great race on both sides at the World Half, even in this strange year. We ended up with, I think, establishing who is currently the two best half marathoners in the world. I mean, I guess you could argue on the men's side, but definitely on the women's side, I think we can firmly say Perez Jepchirchir is the best half marathoner in the world right now.
Yeah, and her marathon credentials are strong as well. Let's go to number 4. People might disagree with me about this, but I don't care. I'm picking it anyway. Bowerman time trial number 7824816R.
I think this was 2, if I'm not. Who cares, though?
Okay, but this was during the time when you were just happy to see any racing, and you got excited about people running around a track. And maybe people would say, hey, I'd rather see them race. And I understand that. And later on in the year, it would have been cooler. And once you had the other Oregon groups racing and some other groups from the Northwest racing, you're like, why can't they just combine them? But whatever. Shelby Houlihan, 14:23. Krisha Schweizer, 14:26. Just smashed the American record. I think we should have it number 4.
Yeah, and I think you could make it a package deal. I know we're not maybe in the business of that, although I did package Jeff Cheercheer's races together. But when you go back to indoors and they both broke the record. It's a break rally. Am I okay?
You're good.
Okay. Sorry. You go back to indoors and the fact that they both broke the American record, and Schweizer got the best of her in that 3,000 to run 8:25. Mm-hmm. And then that, if you remember back to July, we were kind of thinking that, okay, is Schweizer going to take it to her again? And, it was a great race, but then Houlihan kind of asserted her dominance, a not so fast moment for her over Schweizer. Obviously Schweizer still ran 14:26, but 14:23, I thought it was faster than I thought she was going to run. I didn't realize they were going to go that quick. So it was impressive. And just like I said, the fact that it was the encore to the indoor thing, what makes it one of the best races. I don't think you can have too much argument. I mean, it was the best. You had the Monaco 5,000, of course, but yeah, we're going to have some American bias here. And when the American record's on the line, it's and two people get under the old mark, that qualifies as for American audience. That qualifies for one of the best races of the year. We'd say that almost any time, but particularly this year, you have to include it.
It was a snapshot in time, and it exemplified two things. One, really, really big geopolitical issue, i.e. the coronavirus, and why are people doing time trials by themselves instead of traveling to Europe and getting ready for the Olympics? And two, on a much, much more sports-centric element, just showed you how good the Bowerman Track Club was, that they could host meets by themselves, featuring themselves, and still run this fast. They didn't need to include anybody else. They had the personnel to set up and execute a world-class race at a high school in Oregon. So you could show somebody this race in 10 years. You could show somebody this race in 10 years, and you'd have to do a lot of explaining if they weren't, or I guess your son in 10 years who doesn't know what's going on right now. My son doesn't know what's going on. And you could explain a lot about 2020 just based on that race.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. And I think it also, their time trials kind of laid the groundwork for the ability in the Portland area to have several races, with the other meets, the friendly meets. So, they did important things here, and this race, may push Houlihan into having a more of a serious thought about running the 5,000 at the Olympics. And so it's cool to see this rivalry, even though it's inter-team, it feels like kind of a real, and it's friendly, obviously, but it feels like a real rivalry now for years to come in this distance, in the 3 and the 5. And we got a little bit of a taste of it this year, which, was surprising. You could have seen this gone the way of Bowerman doesn't race at all this year, because Bowerman hardly doesn't race very much, period. But then when there's every excuse to not race, they could have just packed it in, and they didn't, and they put on their own meets. Sure, they got a little quirky at the end, mixed 4x4s and whatnot, well, they did that, but they also did the 4x1,500 meter world record or whatever that no one cared about. But in the interim, they did real races, and this was the best one.
They were a victim of their own success, because then I just wanted to see more. And you said this was the second one, then the third one and the fourth one. Yeah, you wanted to see more, and instead they were running 1,500s or 800s or elimination miles. I still wonder, because that women's 3,000 record is very doable. It's 8:25 outdoors, and both of them definitely could do that. And I wonder, if they go back in time, if they just pick up one extra American record, just one extra, one for the road.
Just pick it up.
Yeah.
And Schweizer, I don't know. Schweizer, I'm waiting for her to go to the 10,000. I think she could have eyes on that 10,000 record as well. I mean, that may not be her thing, but this provided the unique opportunity. The coronavirus, I want to say it provided an opportunity, but Shelby Houlihan may not ever run faster than 14:23. I mean, she very well might, but this provided them that opportunity. I think they learned from last year's time trial that they did in the woods, and they're like, "Oh, we can do this. Let's do it on the women's side as well, and have people run fast." And now she's put the American record out there a little bit, and it's going to encourage future generations of U.S. women's distance runners to think that the 1420s are possible. It's not something that we really considered before this year. I mean, maybe with Houlihan because she had run 1434, but now their program has obviously changed the way we understand U.S. distance running on the women's side, and this was it fully maximized. So it was cool to see.
Yeah, and as a whole, I mean, if you want to name an event of the year, it might have been the women's 5,000. I guess you could say the men's pole vault too was pretty cool. But the women's 5,000, we'll get to Gaudet in a second, but you also O'Beary 1422, Houlihan 1423, Schweizer 1426, Laura Waitman 1435, Safanasan 1437, Sheila Chellingat 1440, Yasmin Khan 1440, Jessica Hull 1443. I don't know if you remember that. Shannon Robury 1445, Sagai 1446, Elise Cranny 1448, Courtney Frericks 1450, and on and on and on we go.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good year. Like the women's 5,000 did not stop; they kept going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's been a good one, and we'll talk about a certain 1406 that beat the crap out of all of them. But it was a good year.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Number three. This one, highest pressure race I think we can say of all 2020. Lincoln, the U.S. Women's Olympic Marathon Trials. We were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm tempted to call it pre-pandemic, but I think the coronavirus was well and circulating around this time in the United States. It was our last trip, basically a week later. I think maybe a few days after. I guess you and Gordon went to NCAA, so that was like 2 weeks, a week and a half later, and then you obviously didn't get canceled there. But things were very clearly starting to happen when we were there. They had Trump coming on, supposedly in the middle of the race, giving like an announcement whatever about coronavirus measures and this, that, and the other. And so it was unique in that setting that it seemed like to be the moment where things were changing as far as the nature of the pandemic in the U.S. But on the race itself, when you talk about 3 surprise members of Team USA, and the way Seidel and, or I guess I should say Tuliamuk and Seidel work together, great stories, the top 3 with Seidel, or Tuliamuk, Seidel, and Sally Kipyego. And, it had all the elements, great stories, very, very unpredictable. It's, I don't know. I guess I don't really know what else to say about it other than, once again showed the depth of Team US, or of the US team on the women's marathon side. Because you look at, there's a ton of superstars that were left off. Now, some of them DNF'd and whatnot, but Des Linden did not have a bad race, and she was 4th, and she got beat by Molly Seidel, first marathon. I mean, that's crazy. That is like Des Linden, one of the 5 best U.S. marathoners ever, had a decent race, and she got beat by a first timer. That's because that first timer is very good and NCAA champion. But the emergence of new names and just showing the depth was kind of what I took away from it.
Yeah, and I just remember how shocked I was and how mad I was at myself for being shocked, because I was covering the women's race. You were on the men's beat, as you are at most major marathons, just following every TikTok of what's going on the men's side of things. So the way I like to cover it, I don't know if people care about this, but you want to be prepared for everything. So you play out all the scenarios in your head. That way you're not caught flat-footed, and you have an idea. Yeah. Okay, if it goes this way, this is how I'm going to approach it. If it goes this way, this is how I'm going to approach it. And then at about 20 miles, I just threw my hands up and I was just like, what is going on here? This is crazy. Like, this is not something that I planned for. And, I covered the women's Boston Marathon the year Des Linden won. So I should have been theoretically ready for anything, because that was another one of those races where you're just like, well, what? This just breaks my brain. I don't know what's going on. But Huddle and Sisson both, and Hall, and especially, Hall now in retrospect, dropping out, huge story that they're not making it to the finish. Linden slipping back to 4th. Kipyego making the team, not a stunner, but I don't think anybody had Tuliamuk.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody had Seidel in there. I mean, there was a group of, I don't know what the number was that we settled on, but something like 10
7, I
women.
think. Yeah, I thought it
Oh,
was 7,
7?
if I
Okay.
remember. Yeah, I felt
Okay.
like could be wrong.
Yeah. It could have been. It could have been. But then someone like Helen Taylor, you think, okay, they could make it, or Emma Bates, they could make it. Laura Thweet, they could make it. There was people who weren't, it wasn't completely out of left field. But Seidel was one of those people. And then when you're like, okay, Tulimak, Seidel, and Kipyego is the team. And I mean, I would have lost a lot of money if you said Huddle, Sisson, Linden all aren't on the team. I would have lost a lot. Oh, Hesse, Jordan Hesse. We didn't even talk about Jordan
too,
Hesse.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, I had all these combinations in my head of, okay, this person, okay, that person. And we knew how tough the course was, and we knew how challenging the weather was in particular that day. We should have seen it coming. But what a race by Tulimak, and what a debut by Seidel to make the squad. And Linden was also close there at the finish. So she will be the alternate. But yeah, I don't know. I remember finishing my story in the airport terminal when we got back to Austin. You and I were just pecking away like true journalists. Yeah, I just had to get it on deadline. The printing press was humming. I said, hurry up.
Yeah, I mean, you're used to, like in the men's race, you had one guy that was really surprising, Abdi, because he's 43. But he also, if you looked at it from another side, you're like, well, there's no one who has more experience than Abdi. So it kind of makes sense that he would thrive in a race like this, even though he's 43. But on the women's side, you had all three were serious surprises. I mean, I would be surprised if too many people had Tulia Mock on their teams. I mean, so many other women had run faster, had performed better at majors, had way faster track marks. But this was, no fluke. It was not like those women you mentioned above, the Hall, Huddle, and Sisson were out in front and then all had to drop out. They were getting their butts handed to them by this front group, and then they dropped out. Mm-hmm. So this was just great career performances for those women. And, Seidel has since validated it further by running 2:25 in London. It's going to be a unique setting for them when they run in at the Olympics. Mm-hmm. With Tulimak coming off of having a child, Seidel still very green to this, and then Kipyego, I'm just saying this off the top of my head, but I don't know if she's raced since the trials, which is no fault of her. Obviously, it's been disrupted, but when you compare it to the other side, when you see what Sarah Hall has done, it's I don't know. It's just interesting. It's interesting that so much has happened. You would think with the way Hall is racing that maybe she's getting ready for the Olympics, but no, we've got a totally different team, and we'll that's just, again, that gets back to the depth of this. And you get one chance in the marathon, and that's the uncertainty is really what that's all about. And I think it does give future lessons when we go to 2024. Count on no one. I mean, maybe on the men's side, I don't know where he'll be in 3 years, but you can say, okay, Rupp will have a good shot to be there. But you really can't plan for anyone to be on the team. And we definitely learned that lesson in this women's race.
Well, look into 2024, and I know this is the 2020 end of year awards show, so we're getting a little bit off script here, but who's not going to be there in 2024 that was here in 2020? Maybe some people decide the marathon's not for them, but I mean, you could have pretty, like, if Hall comes back, Seidel, Tulimak, Kipyego comes back, if Huddle and Sisson still stick with the marathon, Jordan Hesse will still be running by then. You figure Bruce and Taylor will still be around. D'Amato is 222 marathoner. Now you get a really long list of people who have run under 225.
Well, I mean, you will have some women there that are getting up towards 40. You're going to have some women that are up there towards 40. I mean, I'm sure some of them will be able to still be around.
It doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter.
Some of those
what'd you say? 43, 47? How old's Abdi?
I know he's 43. He might be 44 now. I know. I get it. But it's hard to imagine the exact same thing. You might include a Carissa Schweizer in that mix by then. Who knows?
Well, you just moved her up from the 5K all the way to the marathon. You just went to 10K in the last segment, and now she's in the marathon.
3 more years. So she makes this Olympic team. I mean, you're going to wait until your third Olympic team to run the marathon trials. I mean, I don't think you want to do that. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I think some of those women will drop off, but some stars will come up into their place.
Yeah, I'm just saying as a total, like if you're saying, I mean, it just depends what you think is medal contention worthy. But you just have so many people who I think can run on the right day with the right course under 223. It's pretty cool to see. And you keep hearing, I'm just contrasting with the men. With the women, there's just a lot of consistency up there. You keep hearing the same names over and over again. Because Tuliamuk, although she was a surprise, I think a lot of people had her as a sleeper type because she's run well before in majors. You know, this was her best race, but it wasn't completely out of nowhere.
No, you're right.
It wasn't.
No, you're right.
It wasn't like a Boston marathon. You know, some of the names were people who weren't even pros. So, in any event, let's keep it moving here. Number 2, another marathon here, the London Marathon for the women, I thought belongs on this list. Bridget Kosgei, of course, runs 2:18:58. Talked about the world record, but the weather would not allow for it. And then Sarah Hall even splits her way 2:22:01 and gets second, even though she did not have a lot of help out there. Surprising result, even though it was supposed to be really deep and really fast. It kind of got blown apart there because of the weather and the pacing was a little screwy. But just the fact that they had the London Marathon this year, I think it belongs on the list.
Certainly. It's, you know, give credit to Kosgei for winning as the favorite when Kipchoge wasn't able to do that in the same conditions. Mm-hmm. So, you know, she further proved herself, you know, as the best women's marathoner in the world. And for Hall to catch Chepngetich, the world champion, somebody who's run, you know, super, super fast in the marathon, was a huge deal for her. You know, she's had another successful marathon since then. So it's kind of like, it feels like in her terms, that's been a long time ago. But yeah, maybe not the best race up front. But when you add in that, you know, Kosgei was able to win even in bad conditions and really, really entrench herself as that Olympic favorite and still the best marathoner in the world while so many women now are running so fast. I don't know. It was just more proof of what we already knew, I guess, about Kosgei, and then it was an elevation for Sarah Hall. So other than that, I mean, you did have some other decent performances, but those two were the big takeaways, obviously. Kosgei just being rock solid and Sarah Hall just having this just this incredible confidence and the grittiness, this late career stage, you know, that is impressive, especially having that really, you know, it'd been several months, but just coming back off the trials, you know, I think you saw a lot of marathoners really take it easy as far as racing this year, but that's never going to be Sarah Hall's thing. And she really attacked the rest of 2020 with such a vengeance. And it continues to work for her. So bright future, even at 37, and even with the uncertainty of when the next marathon will be, we continue to be excited about Sarah Hall because, you know, she's going to find a race and more likely than not right now succeed in it.
She's going to find several races, and they're all going to be a couple weeks apart, and she's going to run in all of them. Yeah. I part of the reason why I include this and part of the reason why I have it ahead of the Olympic trials was just because it happened and they were able to do it, and they were able to do it under the circumstances. And it felt like at the time, it felt like such a bonus that we were getting that race. You know, the men's side had all the headlines, of course, with Kipchoge versus Bekele, which ended up being a Dan versus Dave 2020 version. But the women's race, you know, turned out to be a good race with a lot of big takeaways. And because they were able to pull it off, I think deserves to be included there. It was the only, you know, we've talked about bubbles on and off. You know, Gordon's obsessed with different types of bubbles. This was the only one that had an actual bubble setup. So I thought it deserved inclusion there.
Yeah, everything else has been, you know,
show us your negative test.
Yeah. It's been slightly restrained. This was an actual one, so it was cool to see. You know, would have liked to see more Americans come over, but Sarah Hall definitely elevated this, and I don't know. It was a cool race. The men's one was disappointing, but you know, whatever. It happened. It was cool that they pulled it off.
Yeah. We're not talking about the men on this one. We're talking about the women. Okay, number
I
one.
know, I know. I've been breaking the rules every
Number one, the best race of the year will go to Valencia. Letensipet Geday's 14:06 world record. Lincoln, was there any doubt that this would be the race of the year?
No, it shouldn't have been. If you ask Helen O'Beary, should this be the race of the year? Probably not. He's coming out strong on my side, saying that the wave light technology is, well, she's putting it akin to doping. That seems a little strong. No, but there was not any doubt when someone breaks the Tierney Baba record, and to me, when I heard that she was going to be going after. Yeah, when she breaks it by 5 seconds, and I heard she was going to go after this, and I was like, I guess they needed a women's race. Like, surely she doesn't have a shot at 14:11, but oh my, she certainly did, and it's if you go back through the catalogs of the FloTrack podcast, I've been critical of this record simply because I thought, somebody of Geday's, who very well may not be the best 5,000 meter runner in the world right now, let alone in world history, has now broken the world record by 5 seconds. That's got to be indicative that the wave lights are very, very helpful, and maybe to the detriment of the sport. But I've since eased back. Time has given me wisdom and said, you know what? Two things, that's fine if the world record holder is not the best championship runner. Those two worlds can coexist, and maybe I should give her a chance. It's been at that point, it had been a year since the world championship, so maybe now she is as good or near as good as Safan Hassan. So I've since eased my position. I don't want to be so critical. We can argue if the wave light, whatever, but we're just talking about race of the year, and somebody ran 14:06 in this challenging year. 14:06 is an absurd time. It's showing that despite the fact that it took 12 years to lower this record, that soon we're going to have at least I think soon we're going to have a sub 14-minute women's 5,000 record. That's going to be astonishing. And as you noted at the time, this record was due. It was actually weak compared to its cousins there in the 10,000 and in the 1,500. So I was blindsided by it, but when you do peel back the layers a little bit, this was due to fall. And just because Geday hadn't had all this success by winning gold medals does not mean that this is a record that I should have said shouldn't count or not, is fluky. It wasn't. I give respect to Geday now and say that she's earned this, and we'll see what she can do in 2021.
I like how you took the L on that a couple months ago, and then you bring it back up again to just remind everyone that you took the L one more time.
Well, I don't want to just because I could easily. We have some people I think that listen to this day in and day out, and they could be like, "Wait a second, wasn't this guy like railing on Letensipet Geday that she didn't deserve to have this record?" And I just want to remind people that you can change your opinion. You're
railing at the lights, weren't you? Weren't you railing at the lights?
I know that, and saying that she only broke it because of that, and then. I think you're probably surprised at my position because you sent me the text about that article with Helen O'Beary. Well, Helen O'Beary is basically saying what I was saying a couple months ago, that the lights are
doping.
An unfair aid. I don't think I said they were doping. It's not the equivalent of like
that's 100% sure.
needle in the arm, EPO straight into the veins. That's a little extreme. But
optical doping.
She's saying like kind of what I was saying, that at the time that it takes away a lot of the onus on the athlete to maintain their pacing when the pacer drops off. Well, now you don't have to do that. So regardless, the record's 14:06.
Yeah.
If we look at a broader scope than just the time, that the fact that it's generating this discussion even now is further proof that it's the race of the year, because it's still having ramifications now because of the circumstances of which it was run.
Yeah, 100%. And there were very few performances this year where I was just stunned because something was so fast. Obviously, the marathon trials were stunning because of who finished top 3. But I remember being taken aback a bit by that Bowerman race. And it's, 14:23, 14:26, that's fast. And then a few months later, Geday drops 14:06. It was one of those times where you're blanking, you're, wait, what? What did I just see here? Or to quote you, did I just see what I just saw? In one of the best track and field quotes of all time. I think Joe Buck has been copying that actually for his football broadcast. It's so good. Yeah, O'Beary's take was a little strong because then she goes on about how like they shouldn't set up record attempts for anybody, as if she hasn't paid attention in the last, I don't know, 70 years of track and field, as there's been all sorts of record attempts set up for people. It's yes, that part is obviously that gives you advantage over somebody else, but that's kind of unavoidable. There's no real way to work around that. So, I mean, this sets up just Gaudet being just a fascinating figure the next 4 or 5 years because she's young enough, she's medaled, now she has the world record. Well, can she defend it? And if you're looking at the 5,000 next year in Tokyo, if Sifan Hassan runs it, you know, Hassan, Gaudet, O'Beary, among others. I mean, if Shelby was in that race, Constance Klosterhalfen, she's medaled now. There's a lot of people there that can run what's 14 mid to basically 14 flat, right?
Yeah. O'Beary's hoping that the races run in the parking lot outside, everybody barefoot, and they just time it with a sundial. So we'll see if she's able to, if that request is satisfied. But yeah, it should be fantastic. And we'll see if O'Beary's mindset's changed when she gets in a wave light technology race and if she breaks the world record. I think her mindset maybe would change. But because mine certainly, Gaudet's legitimate, and maybe she can't close in 60, or she couldn't close in 60, in 2019. Maybe she'll be able to, or maybe she won't need to. Maybe she'll take it out. We'll see. But she definitely improved her standing in the world by, I would say, the most of anyone, perhaps save Jeb Cheer. So, I thought she deserved to at least finish second in Athlete of the Year just based off that one performance because it was so extraordinary.
Yeah. And you're right, the lights is going to be something we talk about forever. I'm sure O'Beary will get into a race with lights because they're going to integrate them more into meets throughout next year, not just for world record attempts, but just to keep people on pace. So that is a reality. So if you're tired of getting mad at shoes, you can get mad at lights in 2021.
Yeah. Helen O'Beary wants to get rid of the 3-point line in basketball. And dunk.
The old-fashioned way. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, well, that'll do it. Did we miss anything? Anything you want to add to the best women's performances of 2020?
No, Kevin. Unless we still have a couple days, so maybe something will pop up. Is Sarah Hall what's she thinking? What's she want to do?
Yeah.
She's gonna go.
Well, you almost want to add. You want to add on an addendum for Sarah Hall because it's like she has her own separate category.
Yeah.
Because then she also ran 2:20 in the marathon project. But I put the London race in there because obviously that's a marathon major and it had a major quality field. Even in a weird year like this, it had the Kosgei dynamic, and of course the fact that they had to scramble just to get the race going was amazing. So.
All right.
That's it. That's all we got. Thanks to Alon for producing. Yeah, we'll be back with more end of the year podcasts. Stay tuned. Hope everybody is safe out there. We'll talk to you guys next time.